please.
Thank you, Professor Minohara. Let me at the outset thank IDSA, specifically Jagannath Panda, Dr. Jagannath Panda, for inviting me here, and of course Japan Foundation and other friends here. I'll be talking about India and Japan in the Indo-Pacific from a geopolitical, geo-economic lens, substantially. If you look at the gross domestic product, a very basic data that we often take in economic data, you will notice that out of the top 10, there are only 3 Asian countries. That is, one is China, one is Japan, the other is India. So, of course, the locus of economic power is increasingly shifting towards the east, as they say. By 2050, 50% of global GDP will be coming from the Asia-Pacific region. But at the end of the day, it is these 3 countries that will define the geopolitics of Asia. It is going to be China, India, and Japan to a large extent, which will be defining the geopolitics of Asia. So therefore, the relationship between these 3 countries will define the trajectory of international politics in this region. Of course, United States being present there. If we take that and move forward, if you take the India-Japan joint statement, it talks about 2 important things. One, the title says that we want to move towards a free, open, and a prosperous Indo-Pacific. And the relationship between India and Japan is special strategic global partnership between 2 countries. I mean, India has used the word strategic partnership to define relationship with many countries. So what is a strategic partnership? How do you define a strategic partnership? For me, strategic partnership is that partnership which will fundamentally alter a balance of power in a given region. So therefore, for me, India and Japan's relationship qualifies to be a strategic partnership. It has many dimensions to it, which is multifaceted, both political, security, and economic dimensions to it. And in my opinion, India and Japan strategic partnership with these multidimensional phenomena can fundamentally alter, and is altering, the balance of power in Asia. Having said that, the other important point to be noted is that, as was pointed out earlier, Japan was the first country that Prime Minister Modi visited outside South Asia, and there is a lot of talk about investments, and there is a lot of investments that are happening, and special finance facilities are being created. We are talking about not only running high-speed trains, but the word localization of high-speed trains has been used in the joint statement, which needs to be noted. There is a lot of discussion as to whether we require something like a high-speed train in this country, and references to Maruti on both sides of the experience have been cited. People are saying today Maruti is a common man car, but when it was started, it was a luxury good. So when people are using Maruti as an example to say that it is a common man car today, but when it was started, it was luxury good. That's one dimension of it. The other dimension of it is that, do you want to tinker when you are collaborating with Japan? Do you want to tinker with your economic and structural processes, or do you want to leapfrog? What did Maruti do? It enabled us to get into automobile industry. Similarly, localization of high-speed trains. We are collaborating with, the joint statement talks about the possible collaboration between Kawasaki and BHEL. Will we have a similar leapfrogging in terms of railways? And what is railways here? It is steel industry and metallurgical industries. So if you are going to localize high-speed trains, will we have a leapfrog in the way these sectors in the economies are going to work, whether it is metallurgy or steel industry? So when we are talking about high-speed trains and India-Japan cooperation, it is about a quantum shift, a leap in the domestic sectors such as steel, metallurgical industries, and of course transport, which is very evident. So that is how I would approach when we look at high-speed trains, rather than take a very small tinkering-based approach. I think we should go with a greater vision. The second dimension is that there is, of course, a bilateral. Professor Nakagawa spoke about the ODA. I won't be going into it. In terms of ODA also, there has been, for just this 1 year, 21,000 crores have been allocated for Japanese overseas assistance. This includes roads in Northeast India. This includes improving railway networks in between Bangalore and Chennai. This includes ferry linkages between Bombay and across the sea. All these things are happening. So India-Japan relationship, this emphasis on high-speed trains is not happening at the cost of other bilateral development economic issues as well. So there is a significant ODA component which is playing into it. In terms of bilateral trade relationship, there has been it is decent, it is healthy, there is a scope for significant improvement. In 2004-5, according to Indian numbers, these are yen, Japanese numbers that I've placed here. According to Indian numbers, it is 2005, it is about $5.6 billion. In 2014, we touched almost $18 billion, and now it has gone down a bit. Why did it go down? Because one, India has experienced a slight slowdown in its economy, and second, the oil prices have gone down. So if oil prices have gone down, when you are exporting petroleum products, the cost of petroleum products will also go down. So that is also getting reflected in the exports that India is making to Japan. So that dynamic also needs to be kept in mind when we talk about slowdown and related issues. In terms of foreign direct investment year on year, I mean this is every year, there have been some good years like 2008 as Professor Nakagawa pointed out, but from 2013 if you notice it has been steadily rising, the foreign direct investment in India. And we need to take a more holistic picture. That people often say Japan is the third largest FDI investor in India if you take statistics from 2000 to 2017. But what is the first? Mauritius. And we know about Mauritius, right? I mean, so therefore to say Japan is third and it's not coming in a big way does not actually capture the politics or the story behind the numbers or the story behind the statistics. So Japan is therefore, in my opinion, a leading investor in India. Second, Singapore is the second largest investor in India. Singapore again is the platform for various companies from across the world through which things are operated. So therefore Japan is not, in my opinion, the story behind the numbers is the third largest. In my opinion, it's a significant player in India's FDI that needs to be taken into account. Look at Southeast Asia. I've talked about I just spoke about India-Japan bilateral. If you take Southeast Asia, for both India and Japan, Southeast Asia is an important player that needs to be looked into. It's a maritime hub of global trade, so therefore it becomes important. For Japan, of course, it is lot of substantive relationship is there, heart-to-heart relationship, Fukuda Doctrine, drawing from that, and of course more recently PM Shinzo Abe talked about the 5 principles that are going to govern a Japan-ASEAN relationship. One is democracy, human rights and freedom, free and open seas, trade and investment, cultural heritage and youth. These may look like stated principles, but if you look into the practice, you will notice that these things are getting operationalized in many ways, and I'll come to that. Japan is the third largest trader of ASEAN, in trading partner of ASEAN. India comes somewhere around 9th. We still have a long way to go and catch up with other countries. If our economy picks up momentum, then probably we will do so. And in the recent past, there have been concerns about withdrawal, commitment, lack of commitment from United States, and probable withdrawal of United States. Whatever phrases you may use, we are seeing Japan is scaling up its engagement of Southeast Asia. We are seeing specifically under Shinzo Abe. He has visited all the countries. He has visited, including most recently, he has visited in 2017 Philippines. He gave Japan promised $8.66 billion. Australia, they were talking about how do you re-energize the Alliance Hub and Spoke Alliance framework. Indonesia, they're talking about $4.5 billion aid with specific reference to port railway projects. The atmosphere in Indonesia may be lukewarm, but in Vietnam it is very warm towards Vietnam-Japan relations. About $1.5 billion has been promised. This is in addition to what has been going on. If you take the ODA statistics, more detailed study was done by Professor Nakagawa. You will notice something important here, that from an Indian perspective, Myanmar is getting a significant amount of ODA. right in India's neighborhood. And then you have Vietnam, which is again a partner for India. I mean, we may be doing a lot of defense sales and others, but Japan is also an important economic player that needs to be noticed. Myanmar is a very important thing, and something significant is happening with Japanese investments. They may talk about growing Chinese presence in Burma, Myanmar, for instance in Chakhew port, but it will be a substantially, this special economic zone in Chakhew will substantially be an extractive oriented industry, or an extractive oriented industries will be located in Chakhew. Why? Because the markets are located in Mandalay, Yangon, Naypyidaw framework, I mean that corridor. So if you look at this is where Japan is focusing its energies, whether it is Mandalay Yangon railway line, whether it is developing Tilawa port, or possibly getting more involved in Dawei port. These are all the important things that Japan is doing, and this is good for us. I mean, this is how a market based approach will look like. So Japan is developing two growth centers. One is in Mandalay, the other is in Yangon. It is following the Thailand model, where Bangkok is the hub of economic development, growth pole strategy. So Japan is implementing this growth pole strategy right in our neighborhood, which is good for us. And broadly, from a Bay of Bengal perspective that Dr. Basu was referring to, we have been talking about BBIN. We have been working on it, and we have been implementing the Kaladan multimodal project. Oops. This is what I was talking about. The Kaladan multimodal project. We are talking about the BBIN. We are talking about the Kaladan multimodal project. Japan is implementing two roadways, NH54 and NH51. They are right in consonance with Kaladan multimodal project. We are implementing the trilateral highway. Japan is developing the corridor between Mandalay and Yangon and Dawei ports. We are working on East Coast Economic Corridor. Japan is working on Bay of Bengal Industrial Growth Corridor, Big B. The area has proposed lines between Bangkok, Dawei, and Bangalore and Chennai. We are working on developing Chennai, Bangalore economic corridors, and lot of work is happening on the Andhra Pradesh side as well, with certain districts of Anantapur. And of course, as was pointed out, the Sagarmala projects are coming here, and Andaman and Nicobar, the possible collaboration between Japan and India is taking place. If you move away from Southeast Asia, Bay of Bengal, and move little westwards, you will get into Indian Ocean, the Western African littoral coast. These are all the ports that China is developing, or significant presence, whether it is Djibouti, where it has invested heavily in the recent past, and the other place it is investing is Bagamoyo, where it is drawing from Congo, Zambia into Bagamoyo in Tanzania, whether it is Lamu port, which is in Kenya. So these are all the Chinese developments. It is broadly in this growing Chinese presence in Indian Ocean in the West African coast that India and Japan are operationalizing the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. If you look at the Indian Ocean Rim Association countries, and I plotted the top 3 countries with largest trade partners, you will notice that these are all the countries with whom the China is the leading trade partner, with about out of 21, it is either in first, second, or third position in about 17 or 18 countries. India is the next country which has about 7 or 8 partners with which it's a leading trade partner. And Japan comes with about 3 countries with which it's a leading trade partner on the Indian Ocean Rim region. I mean, that's where we are talking about the necessity of collaboration. Then that's why the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor comes into play. The India-Japan joint statement in 2016 stressed the importance of connectivity between India and Asia and Africa. Both the prime ministers have referred to it. There is something very interesting about the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. If you noticed, the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor has not yet come out with a map. That's because we are not giving a map and telling the African countries to fall in line. This is going to be a consultative process. This is the reason why we are talking with, it specifically talks about stakeholder consultations and enhancing capacity and skills. AAGC seeks to leverage two things. One, Japan's technology and capital, and India's economic interactions with Africa and history, and Indian diasporic presence. There is a strong Indian diaspora that I've plotted in the table there. You will notice that India has a strong diaspora presence, but we need to be little cautious when we deploy diaspora for our economic and political interests. If you go too close to them, then their loyalty will be questioned. If you abandon them, then you will not be able to leverage them. So you need to find that fine balance when you're collaborating. Probably working through a third country like Japan is another way of ensuring that you engage with the diaspora without raising local anxieties. So I plotted what India and Japan have been doing in Southeast Asia, Bay of Bengal, West Africa. That's the broader economic grand strategy we are seeing in the Indo-Pacific region between India and Japan. Thank you.